Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for Kamen Rider, almost said Glam. I don't know, like Glam and Vlam and Gavv. This is a blooper. Hey YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for Kamen Rider Gavv, episode 18, and I almost said 43, but that was actually last week's Boom Boonger. So, this week's episode literally picks up where we left off with the Vlam fight, so much so that we replay like the first 1-2 minutes of the last fight. Like sometimes they'll sort of pick up like that or do kind of like a mini montage version, but I was like, guys, I've already watched this. Like it was insane. I almost fast forwarded. But anyway, that was kind of weird. But then when we finally get some new content, we have one of the members of the Stomach family who I'm going to call Neville at this moment, because in this episode, Shoma explains the Stomach family to Honto and he gives all their names. And like, I knew they had names, but I'm like, this is a good crash course for someone like me that doesn't pay attention to this. I'm going to call him Neville. But he just kind of is like, look, I've made my own Vlam, wahaha, my own Kamen Rider. And then that leads to Shoma and Honto sharing more information. And it got me thinking about a couple things. I can't remember, did Honto tell Shoma where he got his powers from? From the preview next week, it looks like he's going to meet the scientist guy. But I can't remember if he told him that. And I was thinking, like, it kind of makes sense that Shoma wouldn't press Honto for more info, because since he's more, like, concerned about keeping his secrets, I don't think he would press that, but I'm honestly surprised Honto hasn't pressed Gavv more for things. Like in this week's episode, he learns more about the Stomach family, but unless I'm misremembering this, it feels like I'm like surprised he hasn't pressed Shoma more for where he got his powers. Like he asked, what did Shoma say? I honestly can't remember that because I was too focused on like the friendship aspect of it. But I thought that was interesting to finally lay that down, and it makes me curious like why Honto hasn't pressed him more about it. It's interesting because this week's episode 2, it felt like a part 2 of 3. Like last week's very much felt like a part 1, which I think I mentioned in last week's review. But this week's felt like a part 2 of 3. Like we did wrap up the Monster of the Week stuff. You know, Shoma fought him at the end. And during that fight, it was kind of nice. Like we finished him off with the caking form, but he used a couple other forms, which was really nice. Like not only is it nice to see the forms not forgotten about, but it adds some variety to the fight. But we did wrap that up. But the Vlam story very much feels like a continuation. So this episode was, you know, feeling kind of like a midway point in a way with all that. And when we get to the end of the episode, we do manage to split off. Like I said, we finish off the Monster of the Week while Vlam fights Honto. And this scene here was a good fight scene. You know, it wasn't as acrobatic as usual, but it was a good fight scene. I think the most memorable moment was actually when, like, Vlam was about to shoot Honto point blank, and then he pulls out his chocolate gun, and then he pivots. Pivot! Pivot! That's what he was saying in his head, and then he shot the chocolate gun out of his hand. I thought that was really cool. But the episode ends with him being like, you have failed this pudding, and he just shoots him up after he's insulted by Honto saying that he's one of the Stomach Inc. people. And it was this moment and another moment that I think was the most fascinating thing to talk about. Because in a lot of ways, this was a pretty surface level episode, you know, kind of like a midway point, like I said. We did have a scene with them investigating with Sachiko where there was like a funny little drawing they made, and there was some exchange of information, but like not a lot happened. Like I said, it was kind of this middle part. But there was some interesting things that got me thinking about Vlam's character. Now, it was obviously that moment at the end, and also a conversation he had with the bird monster about dark treats, and it's something I haven't given a lot of thought to, and I could be misremembering this also, guys. But as far as I know, like the dark treats aren't essential, and I really thought about it for the first time as an addiction. Because sometimes you will have Sentai or Rider series where you'll have a dynamic sort of like this, where they're giving them something that they need to live. But it doesn't seem like dark treats, I mean, hence treats, because like in real life, you know, treats like a Snickers bar or M&Ms aren't an essential for our lives, is kind of more treated like an addiction. Like the way she describes it sounds like an addiction, not just like a Snickers, but like a drug or alcohol or something like that. And I thought that was really interesting and kind of dark for a series about candy. I mean, people, I guess, can get addicted to foods, but not on the same way. I don't know. This isn't an addiction debate. But I thought that was a really interesting dynamic, especially since interesting dynamic. I'm so sorry. The word dynamic is ruined forever. It's really embarrassing when I do that in front of just normal people. Like, why did you just shout out something dynamic? I'm like, gotcha! So anyway, what I was talking about was like Vlam's reaction to it. Log A9's, Lagavulin 16. He was like very dismissive of like, oh, I can't believe you're addicted to dark treats. And it makes me curious about like the Granites overall as well as him. Because it seems like he's not motivated by dark treats despite him acquiring them for Stomach, which obviously he's doing to gain goodwill. But it made me think about the dynamic of the fact that not all Granites really are bad. Like, that's the way Honto sees it. But really, it's only Stomach Inc. coming after us. And as far as we know, like, Granite Society isn't necessarily bad. And I think that's kind of an interesting angle when you think about it from their characters, and also from Honto's perspective, and from kind of the limited perspective that humans are exposed to Granite. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. But also the thing that was interesting was Vlam's reaction to being like offended that he was part of Stomach Inc. And I think that sheds more light on his motives. That's why I was thinking about like regular Granite Society. I think he was just a regular member of Granite Society that was wronged somehow by Stomach Inc., obviously. And I think that will probably be the common ground when he maybe works with them later. I'm curious to see how that goes down. I see some people thinking, you know, it'll be the typical redemption eventually or something. Some people thinking he won't be redeemed and it's going to be Sachika that gets the powers, which I'm not sure about, like what the rumors are saying. There's some people that are like, there's a pudding next to her head in the intro, so that's evidence. I'm like, I don't know. So many people are saying that's going to happen, so much so now that I don't want it to happen just because of that. But I don't know how that's going to go down. But regardless of whether Sachika ends up with that eventually and we lose Log A9, I think that's going to be the common ground, and I think that's interesting just when you consider the dynamic of the perception of like what's a good and evil Granite with Hanto, Shoma, and then this guy, who I think is very revenge driven. Like I don't think he really cares about like humans one way or the other, or maybe not even Granites one way or the other. Maybe it's a very specific, you know, rivalry. I don't know if it's like he hates what Stomach Inc. does to Granites overall, or if it's maybe very specific to him or his family. But interesting. So yeah, this episode was overall just okay because it was kind of like a middle part, but it did give me some interesting things to think about in regards to some of the story and themes for the future. But anyways, guys, let me know what you thought of this episode. As always, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.